Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the CyberGizmo, we're going to roll the clock back and take another look at Clear Linux, but we're going to be using the latest versions today, right after this. So it's been, I guess, probably close to 7 months or so since I last looked at Clear Linux. I was using it for a while, and to be honest, I haven't really touched it much since. But I thought because of BigDaddy Linux has got a challenge for Clear Linux, I thought I would update these videos and go back through the install process and explain some of the things that are new and some of the things that are old. So Clear Linux is optimized for Intel architectures. It has been reported to run on AMD, but AMD does not support everything that's in the Intel chipset. And this particular version of Linux is developed by the Intel project team for Clear Linux. So, you know, being that they're they are the creators of the distribution as well as the inventors of the Intel platform, you have to expect that this is going to be heavily optimized for Intel and not AMD. So they optimize all aspects of the distribution, from the kernel to the development libraries to the compilers. Everything is really designed around getting the most performance that is possible out of an Intel chip. It is built with security in mind. There is constant vulnerability scanning. There's common certificate authority management. It also enables such security features such as IP tables, SSH, OpenSSL, IPsec, and VPNs, and are signed and updated content as well. That makes sure that you are getting the official releases and they have not been changed or altered since Intel put the security timestamp and the security keys on them. Just to review that Clear Linux is stateless. It is meant to separate the file system so that it's organized better than a conventional Linux. On the diagram, the traditional Linux, you've got, user data, operating system configuration. It's scattered all over your machine. And Clear Linux tries to take all of that and put that in its proper place, and then they organize that so that if I want to restore the machine to a factory default, even if it's been up and running for months, all I have to do is delete the etc and var directories, and I think also temp. But if I delete those 3 directories, then the system, when it comes back up, will reset itself to its default configuration. Updates are always done as Delta updates, so it does not download a complete set of patches. It downloads patches versus reinstalling the software over again. So that's kind of a difference between the way some of the more core Linux versions work. There is Clear Linux, I would say, I mean, maybe this isn't fair. It's really designed for operations. It's developed from the development standpoint all the way through to production environments to run on their server platform. And Clear Linux does have two. They have a desktop version of Clear Linux, and there is a server version of desktop Linux, of Clear Linux, not desktop Linux, but Clear Linux. And those two are designed to orchestrate together. They use a mixer tool, which brings in, and the default is RPM packages, that brings in RPM packages and creates what they call bundles, which is basically used to create customized releases and updates. When you want to respin or bring something new out, that's the tool that you use to generate the bundles. It also has an auto proxy feature. It's really designed to try to reduce the amount of hand coding or hand work that you have to do. in order to get things working. And yes, it does have telemetry, but it is an opt-in. Telemetry is a little bit different than some of the other collection points that we've talked about in other operating systems in telemetry. This one is designed so that if there are problems with your system, that rather than you having to take the time to go fill out a report and go track a bug report and see what the status is, that if there's a problem on your system, it automatically, if telemetry is on, it automatically reports it to the Intel Clear Linux development team and lets them know, hey, I've encountered that there's some kind of problem. Maybe it's with my configuration. They'll sort that out, and if there is a problem, then of course they will patch it and they will provide it on the next release. But the other thing is that companies and developers can use that same mechanism to monitor the systems that they have deployed, as well as getting reports back on failures of their code while it's either in test, whether it's in development, or whether it's in production. Then you can customize the direction where that telemetry flows. It doesn't always have to go to Intel. Intel can they collect that information on Clear Linux installs, but as I said, it's an opt-in by default. You have to turn it on. We talked a little bit about a bundle. So what is a bundle? Well, most Linux distribution uses packages, and packages and always contain sub-packages, and they're used to maintain. It's a maintenance of granularity that is done during development, and those are then deployed and into running applications. This granularity, however, can cause conflict when you have packages that are using different versions of base libraries, for example. And so that can create instability unintentionally in a production environment, and Intel saw that as a key problem. So what they wanted to do was to, instead of doing this silliness with the packages and trying to maintain and prevent conflicts, they created a use case model which goes out and describes this would be the most often used. For example, if I was building a development machine from Clear Linux, that I would use a set of libraries and a set of packages that were defined that would be most common for developers to use. And so the mixer tool then mixes together all of those other packages, the RPM packages, to create a stable base. And then Intel tests that to make sure that it will work before they release that bundle. So it's designed to try to minimize failures because of package conflicts. So that's really what it's for. I've seen a lot of videos lately where people have like, why do we need bundles? What is that for? Well, the key point of it is to prevent instability in a production environment. That's the key. That's really the key behind it. Whether it works or not, that's a different story, right? That's something over time that people will make their assessment and make their determination of how well that particular solution works. As far as Clear Linux and containers, Clear Linux supports two. They support, but it's actually just one. But Linux supports Docker containers, pure under the runc environment, as well as using Kata containers. And Kata containers is sort of a hybrid. Kata containers creates a virtual machine around the VM to offer a layer of protection that a Docker container alone does not have. So it replaces the runc with the Kata runtime. And the Kata runtime allows me to use the same Docker commands, the same Docker installation processes, only under the covers, Kata is creating a VM around that Docker container. So rather than having the Docker container run directly on your host hardware, you have this intermediary layer of isolation. So the idea behind that is simply to make it harder for a Docker container to gain access to the host machine. right? Because you have to be able to get out of the, not only the runtime, but you have to be able to get out of the VM as well. So yeah, they recommend that. I mean, this is an old thing that was left in here. Clear containers are gone; they're no longer even in the release, so they really don't have any concern about that. But if you are running older releases of Clear Linux, which based on their automated update cycle, I would find hard to believe, but if you are doing that, then yeah, you might want to migrate those to the Kata containers because those are being deprecated. What other features? Well, Clear Linux supports native NVIDIA drivers. They use Flatpacks as their default install, and they also have bundles in the installers as well. So they also support YubiKey, and for one time, they also support smart cards and universal two-factor. So yeah, you have FIDO and U2F. There's also TensorFlow learning and Kubernetes containers orchestration is supported inside of Clear Linux. So you might think for a minute that this is really designed for developers, and that's not true at all. It's really just, it does have, as all Linux does, Linux was written, well, Unix was written by developers for developers and then became a production operating system, and Linux carries that same heritage. So yeah, if you want to say it's a developer release, sure, you can say that about any Linux. Yeah, it was originally written for developers. But I don't think it's fair to say it's only for developers. It certainly isn't. They also allow for something called bulk provisioning through the Oyster Cloud Initialization Service, or ICIS. So what that does is that once you have a system set up with a base number of bundles that you want to install and you're ready to deploy into test or production, you can have this particular layer do a blanket install across all the servers that are needed in your particular package's install. So, yes, it also supports Pixie as well. So, it's got some really interesting ideas. But what does Intel recommend that you use for a minimal system? What are some of the things that you need for support? You can check. Now, I think some of these version numbers I did not really update from the last video, but I know that AVX 512 is supported now, and so, yeah, there's some of those things that are also in there. Does that mean a system that doesn't have all those things, that means it won't run? No, it just means that you might get, well, if you run the installer, it's going to run a compatibility checker, and if it finds something missing, it will refuse to install it. So yeah, it doesn't. Intel Clear Linux does not support BIOS legacy, so you have to install this under UEFI. Anyway, I don't know why anybody would be using BIOS legacy today anyway, unless your hardware is so old. But you know, if it's that old, it probably doesn't have the minimal support for the other features that are in the processor anyway. So yeah, you can run it, man. You can run a compatibility check on any Linux distribution. They have a package you can install and run it ahead of time before you bother to download it and take the time to install it. It also repeats that runtime check at the time that you do an install from the live CD. So you'll find out very quickly if your system is supported or not. The core families that they support, this list hasn't changed since last summer. It's still the same. So as far as compatibility now, this is the recommended requirements, not the minimum. Intel says that the system will run on 1 gig of memory. They recommend 2 if you're going to install a GUI. If you're just installing the command line versions of Clear Linux, yeah, you can get by with 1 gig. They also recommend if you're installing the GUI 20 gig or higher for the install. Now, the base install from the live CD will take about 6.1 gigabytes of disk space or so. So yeah, you'll want to plan accordingly for that. Also, it's OpenGL support, and it has native support, of course, for the Intel HD UHD graphics elements that are built into the chip. It does require an active Ethernet connection if you want to install other bundles at the time of the installation. So yeah, some of the other things that Intel has been working on is compatibility with virtual machines. And so this is new since the since the initial video that I did on this back in the summer of 2019. So KVM is supported, and there is a special bundle that you can use for that called the Kernel KVM bundle, which will install a minimal set. And I have not checked to see whether or not telemetry is enabled. In the old video that I did, Kernel KVM did not install telemetry at all. Also, there are install guides for Hyper-V and Hyper-V LTS. Now that refers to you can deploy Clear Linux with a rolling kernel. So you'll have the 5.5 or whatever the latest release of the Linux kernel is, or you can install an LTS version, which means that it'll be 4.19. If you're deploying this into production environments, you'll probably find that most people would install the LTS, not the rolling. It also has support for Parallels Desktop 14 for Mac. I don't know if those are the minimum requirements. These are the ones that just are on their website. So I'm assuming it's 14 or higher. Usually that's the case. Proxmox Virtual Environment 6.1-3 also will support running Clear Linux. VirtualBox 6.0 or later. And I've talked about VirtualBox before in the 6.0 releases. Personally, I would avoid that. VMware works. There is definite support. There is definite performance problems on VirtualBox. VMware Workstation Player 15.5.1, I'm assuming, or higher, and VMware ESXi version 6.5 or higher would be the things that you would be able to install Clear Linux on. As far as cloud deployment, Intel's also been working in this area. Now, originally, they had Amazon Web Services and Azure. I believe they've added DigitalOcean and Google's cloud platform, and also the Qing Cloud, which is a Chinese-based cloud provider. So, yeah, you have quite a few choices and quite a few different ways of installing. There are instructions on the Clear Linux website under the Getting Started page that will describe the steps needed to follow it to be able to do that, if that is the direction that you want to follow. Now, this is just the same concerns about Clear Linux and its telemetrics. So it's an opt-in solution. It collects data from the running system and it reports it to Intel. It's designed to report bugs and errors that are being fired into your logs, and it reports only those. It also does. It also records the information using an ID that's in your system that does renew periodically. Yeah, there's always concerns with telemetry because there are ways to track it back to an actual machine. So whether or not you trust that, that's up to you, whether you want to enable it or not. I will tell you, however, and I'll check it again today, that in the release that I installed back in the summer, if I use the desktop, if I use the live CD version of the desktop, telemetry directories were created. They were being populated, but the service was not running. So that's a little concerning. However, and the discovery that I made with the kernel KVM version, it did not create the telemetry directories, and it did not create telemetry entries because there was no directory to store it in. So as far as I know, the telemetry systems on the KVMs are non-functional. So if that's a concern for you, turn it off. So I think probably the best thing to do, as always, is try to go and install this and give it a try. So I'm going to switch over to my full screen mode as usual, and I'm going to go here to Virtual Manager. Virtual Manager, I have set this up already, but I'm going to install it again. So I will select create a new virtual machine, and will install it locally, and I'm just going to hit the forward. The next is to go browse and look for installation media. You'll probably remember this from last time. The downloads folder I had to add manually to the virtual manager. It's not on by default. I'm going to choose, this is 32270, which is the latest as of today from the Clear Linux team, the latest ISO. And then I'm going to turn this off, and this has to be generic. You'll need at least 2048 of memory for the graphical user interface. I'm going to give this 2 cores. I gave it 4 last time, but I think I can get by with this many. I'm going to bump this to 30. It won't use it, but I don't know, I might. Let's see, okay, so I did that, and then I'll relabel this Clear Linux 2. I do want to customize the configuration before we start, and I'll show you why. So it brings me into the section that allows me to go in and change things within the system, and right here is my problem. It's defaulting to the BIOS firmware. I don't want that, so I will need the UEFI in order for this to start up. I'll go ahead and apply this, and then I should be able to start. I'll click the begin installation, and it should go ahead and start up here. Let me do what I did the last time. Yeah, we'll scale the display. It's coming up already. Let's get this a little bit bigger. So here we are at our live CD desktop. And just like the last time, I have the install Linux OS, I have a terminal, I have files, Firefox, and all these things. So, you know, you could run this from here if you want. Just remember that any changes you make are lost. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do the install. And so I've clicked on the install to the hard drive. So I'm American English. I'm going to select my time zone as Central. American Central, probably, I guess, or Chicago, something that's close to where I live. There we go. The keyboard is US. Let's go to the installation media. We'll do destructive. It's selected this already, so we'll confirm that. I'm not going to enable encryption. I would if this was a laptop. I'm going to create a user. Give it a super secret password, and then do a confirm. The next thing is that I wanted to show you was I'm going to go ahead and select no for this. And now I could go ahead and start the install, but there are some advanced options that I might want to look at. For example, in this particular part, I can select additional. Now I have to have a network connection that's up for this. But I could go ahead and put in basic dev containers or cloud control or develop desktop apps or whatever else I might need. I can go ahead and do that at install time, and that will take additional time to install. So I'm going to cancel that. I don't want that. I can assign a host. This is where you would select what version of the kernel that you want. So I could select LTS latest. I could select the native default. So that one's be tailored for bare metal. This one I think is, yeah, that's the current. These are all 4.19, 4.14. So you have some choices here as to which kernels that you take, and I'm going to go ahead and confirm that one. You'll notice that auto updates are on, and that is the default for Clear Linux, which means that when you boot it up, it automatically checks for updates. If there are any, it applies them. And I've already tested the network connectivity because I went and got the list of packages. At this point, it's just confirming that this is the partitions I want to install. I could go back and do modifications to that manually if I wanted to. I don't want to. And now we're into, this will take, on this machine, 10 or 11 minutes, but we'll check that. It is 11:21 right now, according to my clock. And I'm going to pause this, and I'll be back when this is done. Okay, so we've installed. It's 11:28, and it was 11:21 when I started, so about 7 minutes to complete the installation in this particular case. Now, I can tell you from experience that if you use VirtualBox, you're probably looking at least double, maybe even triple that amount of time to install because, as I've said in the past, there are performance problems with VirtualBox. Don't recommend it. Also, I did not get boxes to work, and I suspect the reason for that is the default is BIOS. It did come up in it did run the live install, but it would not allow me to go any further with the installation because it failed the compatibility check. And I think that's because UEFI wasn't enabled. I'm not sure if there's a way other than going in and manually modifying the box's config files to be able to do that. So I just use Virtual Manager. It works. It's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and do an exit here. I am done. All I should have to do at this point is simply reboot. And this should boot it up into its native mode. Under the VM, of course. But I did not install the KVM version of Clear Linux. I installed the desktop version. So we'll see what we get here in a minute when it comes up. There we go. And we'll go ahead and log in. And it should set me up and get me to this point right here. So we are running under Clear Linux at this point, and this is, of course, this is GNOME that is running. And let's just, yeah, this long string right here is the system generated name, and that is for telemetry. Let's just see if var telemetry exists. It does not. Well, wait, let's see, var, I think it's under lib. No, I don't see it. Let's check spool. Nope. So between the last time I did this, let's see if there's any logs for it. Nope. So between the last time I did this last summer, when I installed the desktop, I turned telemetry off, and it still was collecting telemetry. Intel has obviously fixed that. But I'm gonna make a really detailed check and just make sure that there isn't any. And of course, yeah, I'll need sudo privileges to do that. I just want to see, yeah, okay, there's a telemetry directory. So there, yeah, and it is capturing still. So, yeah, it also has a socket created. Even though I told it to not do it, it looks like it's still collecting. Let's see. Nope. It's probably a service that's buried, but anyway, yeah, so it's still in there. It's still doing it. Let's take a look and see how much disk space it's actually requiring. And for my root directory, let's see. Oh, I should do it this way. Let's see. 6.4 gig is installed out of the 20 some I gave it. So yeah, I gave it 30. I gave it 30, and then it broke it up. So that part of that is going into other, I'm assuming other areas, but I don't see the mount points. Let's see what we got. A lot. So there's SDA on root. So I know at least one, SDA 1 is probably boot, SDA 2 is probably swap. But we'll confirm that. HTOP is installed by default. 561 meg with that's reported by HTOP. One other thing I noticed is that somebody said on one of the forums They had to install FFmpeg from source. If you type in the name of the command and it's not there, it'll tell you which bundle to install to get it. So I don't know why that person was having to compile from source. Now that is a dev, so that could be the source, and you might have to compile from there. I would have to go check. So, but let's say I want glances. It tells you right here what you need to install. So that's really nice. I don't remember that being active or working the last time I tested this. So let's go ahead and get glances. It's putting on, yeah, this is one of the problems that you have with bundles, is that it installs a lot more than you intended it to. Now, Intel has been listening to the community feedback, and they have been creating packages specific for single purposes. So that's been kind of nice. I know that's probably making their life difficult because you're starting to get back to the problem of installing libraries which could conflict with others. So I imagine that's probably something that they're weighing back and forth between. It's one of the reasons why they use Flatpacks, is because those then create a self-contained application with all of its library requirements that do not impact the system. So we'll get into that more. But first, I want to see just what Glances says. Now, this is with Glances running. 782 meg of memory is in use. I suspect that will probably bounce around a little bit. I'm just watching it. No, it's staying, 783. Yeah, for GNOME, that's not bad. That's not bad. I've seen GNOME take a lot more than this. So, yeah, it's not bad. I mean, for GNOME. You can install other desktop environments if you want. There are bundles for that. There's instructions on their website. Before I end this video today, I'll show you where all that is. Let's just take a look at this. And yeah, 32270, the Linux kernel is probably 5.4. Yeah. So I noticed that also in one of the other reviews that I saw recently was that they were showing a 4.19 kernel. That's because they installed the LTS. So just keep that in mind, that if you want the latest kernel, you can get that with Clear Linux. You just have to do what I did, which is install the native and not the LTS. But if you need the long-term support kernel and not the latest, then you want to do just the opposite. So yeah, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do swap update help. Sorry about that. I've been cold and I'm having to blow my nose every once in a while, and I don't think that's something that you need to see. Probably caused me to get demonetized. Well, I'm not monetized anyway. It'd probably get me kicked off of YouTube. But anyway, in the swap update is the command to manage bundles. I'm got to be careful. It's not packages. It manages bundles. So you can do an info on the version of this particular version of swap update. You can auto update. You can turn that on or off. You can check for updates. I can do that, but I will bet there's probably nothing. Nope, no updates available. And then it goes by version, and that's how they kick things up. So you're not deploying just pieces. The build is what determines what gets deployed. So you are ratcheting up. Say like 32271 came out, that is a ratchet up from your current build. So your build is always going up, and it will install everything that's changed as a delta, not just the things that, not just the particular things that, not just the particular packages that you want, but it's going to do them all. So yeah. You can also get bundle info. You can display a list of the bundles, although I'm going to guess that's going to be pretty long, because I know they've been busy. They've been really busy creating new bundles. Now again, just like on Alpine, you might want to add the sort command to this, and then, yeah, and you're going to come back and look through it. But yeah, there's a lot of bundles. And this isn't all of them either. So I'm not quite sure what I did wrong here. Oh, I got the more command in the middle of it. That's why. So, yeah, there's a ton. If you want different desktop environments or different kernels, you can install kernels that contain the Kata container extensions. At least that was the case before. There's some additional things for GNOME. Let's see. I don't know what you do for KDE, if you want that or if you want XFCE, but I know that it will support that. So let's go look at Flatpacks for a minute. And I'll just review a couple things. Yeah, let's set this up. This is the first time it's run, so it's going to have to update all of them. That didn't take too bad. So if you notice, let's go in here. If you notice that this kind of a tesseract looking cube, that is a bundle. This is a Flatpak. So bundles and Flatpaks are quite different, obviously. So this is gonna, let's say if I open this, it should show me that it contains these two different elements in the bundle. So the firmware and the utilities are both in the same bundle. It's already installed, which is where that check mark comes from. And if I pick a Flatpak, it'll also tell you that this is a Flatpak, but if you want to pick up the native version, you can get it if you install any of those bundles. So if you don't want the Flatpak, you can do it this way, and if you do want the Flatpak, you can do it a different way. So anyway, also, if you want, now you'll notice that, let's go back in there a second. Let's look for OBS. OBS is not here. See that? Not listed anywhere. Why? Well, because you have to do it that way, but it's there. It is a Flatpak, and it is, I think, version 2.4.0.3. So, yeah, and that is a Flatpak. To my knowledge, Clear Linux does not yet support Snap. Don't know what their plans are, if they ever will, but yeah. So if you're looking for something and you don't find it, that's the extensions for FFmpeg, and yeah, I don't know what else to tell you about this, but the default is Flatpak, and bundles are native. So just remember that, the native code. You have a number of things that are installed. Let's see. You have the archive manager, a calculator, the characters and disks, and emoji picker. Let's take a look at disk, and that'll show you your partitions on the drive. Yeah, so I was right. The boot, swap 1 is boot, swap is on partition 2, and then the balance is on partition 3. So on my case, everything is all thrown into one. I wouldn't recommend doing this way if you're going to be using this on hardware. I would break it up into home, temp, and var. So yeah, I mean, it's just good practice. If one of the other things I told you about before is that Etsy is stateless, and this is minimalistic. The reason for that is, sorry, I'll be right back. So if my voice holds together here, so the reason for this is that this is just the modifications that your system has made. If you want to restore your system to the factory default, you can do that. You just obliterate Etsy and you obliterate var. And as far as I know, they have not changed that. So if you remove those, now don't try that with any other distribution. You will not be coming back with it. But with Clear Linux, you can do that. So if you get yourself against the wall and you've configured yourself to the point where you have no idea why your system isn't working anymore, you just take out etc and var and bring it back to a system default state. So, yeah, and if you're putting out stuff, like I said before, like NFS or Samba, you'll have to create the dependency configurations. It doesn't do that for you. So this particular version of a Linux distribution is not for beginners. This is not for beginners. So I would recommend that if you are new to Linux and you're considering to use Clear Linux, if you're a developer, you're probably used to things like that. So yeah, for you, you're probably okay. But for someone that wants to use this for a desktop or use this as a home workstation, I would I would experiment with some other version of Linux first. Get your wheels under you, as it were. Become more familiar with Linux first and understand where things are and why you need particular configuration files for a package before jumping into this. You'll find yourself a lot better off and probably a lot happier. So that's really my comments on Clear Linux. I don't know what else to tell you. We looked at the version, we looked at the amount of disks, we looked at the amount of memory. What else can I tell you? If you want if you want a really good list of all the bundles, go to their website. We need to do that. Yes, we need to do that. So let me bring up Firefox here. And we'll go out to the Clear Linux site. And I'll just kind of show you a few things. It's clearlinux.org is where you would go to pick up any of the information that you want. And up here they have a little bit of introductory information about what is Clear Linux, what its intention is. There's some information if you're a developer. This is a developer that is specific to Clear Linux. So this is not a place where you'd want to go if you want to become a developer. And then the software itself and a little bit about that. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there should be something about documents, documentation. There it is. So yeah, we can go to the view all. And this is where you would get information about getting started. What's this all about? Some guides on, these are guides for specific topics. So if you were interested in writing bundles or developing the kernel or modifying the kernel, debugging the system, this is the ISTR deploy method. So this would be like for mass deployments into production or test environments. The mixer, which is again, that's the tool that takes RPM packages and converts them into bundles. And then about the security, the stateless parts of the system, the update utility, and the telemetrics that Intel gathers. So if you're interested in finding out about that, you can. There are also tutorials about Hadoop and Spark and all these kinds of things, Dockers, Flatpacks, Kata containers, Kubernetes. This is, by the way, Clear Linux is a very good platform for Kubernetes. I know a lot of people and some friends of mine personally that are using this for Kubernetes development, and they are very happy with the speed and the efficiency in which Kubernetes deploys in this environment. So if you're doing TensorFlow, there are bundles specific for that are available under Clear Linux. And and if you're not interested in any of that, you're a web developer or you're a creative developer, there are tools here for you. Whether or not you're creating videos or you're editing videos or you're streaming videos, there's stuff for you for that. If you are a gamer, this platform is probably not ideal for you, just simply because of the way Clear Linux works, and the rolling release schedule that it's under would probably make it somewhat unstable for you. I'm not saying you couldn't get it to work, but I am saying you'll probably find it challenging to keep it working. How's that? In an environment, it's probably not what you would want for a gaming platform. I would suggest Peppermint Linux or MX Linux. even Debian as a gamer platform. There are others, of course. Pick your favorite, but those would be ones that I would want to probably use over this. So, yeah, I mean, there's YubiKey support and some of the information down there. So this is really kind of nice, and it gets started as a step-by-step. So if you're deploying this from a live desktop or you're deploying, now these are different. Desktop is the workstation, server is the server environment for, if you were installing this for a cloud server or your own personal server and you didn't need a GUI, that would be what you would do. If you're, and then if you're installing on a KVM or a Microsoft Hyper-V or Parallels, these are instructions on how to do all of that. If you're deploying into a cloud, you can follow those guides as well. Intel has really spent a lot of time with this and setting this up. It is different from any release that I have seen. It is very different. The three things that I like about Clear Linux is the speed. I like the way that I can recover from a configuration error without having to, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I mean, you could do it manually. You could do your own backups, but those are time consuming. If all I have to do to get back to a baseline install, now, does that replace the backups? No, you still want to do backups, but if you're doing development projects, a lot of times you will build up libraries of stuff that you're doing just for a specific install. When you're done with it, you export it off of your system and put it on some kind of software control system. Do you really need all those packages hanging around again? I mean, it's kind of nice. You can just go in and into Etsy and Var and just blow your system back into a factory default and start over with whatever new development you're doing. So that's kind of nice in a way. I personally don't do things that way. I use Docker, and I do my development under Docker. And so, yeah, I mean, but again, that's up to you on how you can do things. But I like that aspect of it. The third part about it is I like how they keep their documentation up to date. It is very easy to follow. It's very concise. And it's always step by step. So, I mean, those are really some key things with this release that are important. If you're, now again, this wouldn't be for a beginner, because there are, as in all documentation, there are assumptions that are made when it's written. And this is not written for beginners. So anyway, hope that covers the update from last summer. Hope you enjoyed this. And let's see, what else can I tell you as far as my likes and dislikes? My dislikes have not changed. The only dislike I have is I'm just concerned about the platform itself and Intel itself because of the vulnerabilities that were exposed over the past 2 years. So I have a bit of a trust problem. Intel they're clawing their way back, but as the AMD guys know, they definitely have some work to do in the performance arena. Yes, in gaming they are still the kings, but in production and in doing other tasks where it requires multi-threading and multi-cores, Intel is definitely behind the curve. So with that, I think I will leave it there. If you have any comments or any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. Love to hear from you as always. And please like and subscribe. Hope to see you all again real soon. Bye for now.